welcome to our webinar, Reducing Plastic Pollution at the Local Level. My name is Doug Wood. I'm the co-creator of How Green is My Town, which is the sponsor of this event. For those who are not familiar with How Green is My Town, it is an online kind of a checklist of 50 things that any town or village or city can do to address the interconnected issues of sustainability, environmental health, and the challenges of a changing climate. It's filled with resources, program and policy ideas, product solutions, links to towns and cities that are doing innovative things, including maybe many of you who are with us today. I urge you to take a look through the website. Reach out to us with anything that we've missed, ideas that you think should be on here, resources that should be included. Our program manager, Amanda McCabe, is always looking for things to add to make the site even more extensive than it is already. Again, I want to thank you for joining our webinar today. As you'll hear from our speakers, plastic pollution has moved from a worldwide ocean, landfill, and air pollution problem to a very serious human health issue, as scientists are beginning to discover tiny pieces of plastic in the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, and now we're discovering that babies are being born with plastic inside with unknown consequences for their health later in life. So the sooner we can stem the tide of plastic pollution, the better. There are three ways in which local governments can make progress in our effort to combat the plastic problem. The first is simply to control how the municipality spends its own money. One of the reasons behind our creation of How Green is My Town is the fact that the combined purchasing power of villages, towns, and cities across America is huge. We're talking more than $2 trillion in 2023 that was spent by local municipalities, and some of that was for payroll, of course, but a lot of it was for things that local governments buy. Everything from paper clips to coffee cartridges to promotional items, fleece jackets, even artificial turf fields, which you'll hear a little bit about today. The second way for local governments to clamp a lid on plastic pollution is through local laws and ordinances that control how businesses in your community conduct themselves with regard to plastic. Things like prohibiting food establishments from using styrofoam food containers or implementing the skip the stuff policies where plastic ware in takeout orders is only included when the customer specifically requests it. And there are many other ideas in this realm that you'll hear about today. And finally, local government can set an example and help its constituents be part of the plastic reduction process, for instance, by providing paper bags for autumn leaf collection rather than these gigantic plastic bags that simply clutter up our landfills. Encouraging backyard composting where it's appropriate to cut down on garbage and our solid waste problem. And how about an agreement between board members not to bring plastic water bottles or cups to board meetings, or not to provide plastic cups at city events? These are just a few of the ideas that will help stop or at least tamp down the proliferation of plastic. So those are the three avenues of plastic pollution which we'll be exploring today. We have some outstanding speakers from all over the country who are here to share their ideas with you. And after their presentations, we'll take your questions. I'll be monitoring the chat again, so please put your questions in the chat. Our first speaker is Judith Enck, the former EPA Administrator of Region 2 of the EPA here on the East Coast. Judith was nominated to that position by President Barack Obama after working as Deputy Secretary for the Environment in New York State Governor's Office, and also as a policy advisor to the New York State Attorney General. After leaving the EPA, Judith founded the nonprofit Beyond Plastics, which has become the leading nonprofit voice for plastic pollution reduction. Unfortunately, Judith was unable to join us in person for our webinar today, but she did record this welcome message. So let me share my screen.
I'm so happy to be with all of you today, and my sincere thanks to Grassroots Environmental Education for bringing us all together. This is such an important issue, and local governments really have a role to play. And it's the right thing to do. And also, disposal of waste is typically the responsibility of local governments. So you have a built-in economic incentive to reduce waste. We've all heard the waste hierarchy: reduce, reuse, recycle, then landfill or incinerate. And the reality is the top three rungs of that solid waste hierarchy, reduce and reuse, we rarely get to that. I love recycling, but when it comes to plastics recycling is an abysmal failure. So I want to urge all of you to really focus on waste reduction and reuse in your local operations, and where you can, promote the recycling of items like paper, metal, and glass. I'm reminded of an executive order that former President Bill Clinton signed during his administration, requiring the federal government to use a certain percentage of post-consumer recycled paper. And you can imagine the federal government uses a lot of paper. That one executive order completely transformed and launched the recycled paper industry in the United States. Using your purchasing power, you can support innovation in entrepreneurial companies that really focus on reuse and reduction of waste. Why does this matter? I have met many climate change deniers during my tenure in state and federal government. I've never met a plastic pollution denier because it's everywhere. Your local government is spending a lot of money picking up plastic waste, plastic bags in the trees, cigarette butts on the streets that have plastic in the filter. The science on plastics is very compelling in terms of what it is doing to damaging our health. Plastics are made from chemicals and fossil fuels. And so this is very much a climate change issue. And most plastics are produced in environmental justice communities in Texas, Louisiana, and Appalachia. We are very interested in reducing the pollution in these environmental justice communities. So if you do things like switch to reusable dishes in your cafeterias and your Meals on Wheels programs, you will reduce your use of single-use plastic. If you do things like install drinking water fountains all over your community, not just in the airport, but how about at the bus stops, the bus stations, the train stations where people gather? Climate change is making our temperatures soar. More people need access to free, clean drinking water. And a simple initiative like launching more public drinking water fountains would go a very long way. We have solutions. What we are missing is the political will at the local government to really tackle the problem of plastic pollution. In addition to your procurement policies, I urge you to do things like pass local laws, to do things like ban plastic bags. When a restaurant is getting a takeout order, they shouldn't automatically put all the plastic utensils and condiments in the bag. You can pass something called Skip the Stop local ordinance. You can ban polystyrene foam food packaging at the local level. Styrene is a known carcinogen. Do we really want it with our cheeseburger or our hot cup of tea, where the carcinogen styrene leach into your cup of tea? More modest things like let's not allow intentional releases of balloons into the atmosphere. A number of local governments, particularly in the South, have been in the lead on that. The state of Florida has banned the intentional release of balloons into the air. My point is, you know your local government best. You don't need to spend a couple years studying the problem. You don't need a big waste audit. You know what you're purchasing. Do everything you can to reduce the use of single-use plastic. It's good for your health. It's also good for the taxpayer bottom line.
So that was our message from Judith Inc. And we were delighted that she could be part. Wish she was here in person, but understandably, she's been extremely busy these days. Okay, and now to help us set the table for our presentations today, it's my pleasure to introduce Patty Wood, Patty is the founder and executive director of nonprofit Grassroots Environmental Education. She's a visiting scholar at Adelphi University, where she teaches in the College of Nursing and Public Health. She also served on the New York State Governor's Advisory Council on Sustainability and Green Procurement. Patty Wood.
I'm delighted to be here, and I'm just going to run through the reasons why we are doing this. And a lot of this information may be familiar to you, but hopefully I will give you some new things to think about. So for more than 100 years, we have been increasingly relying on plastic for human use, from industrial and manufacturing applications to the myriad products that we use in our homes on a daily basis. An undeniable virtue of plastic materials is their low cost to manufacture. And because they are cheap, we are inclined to wrap everything in plastic packaging, create thousands and thousands of single-use plastic items, and throw away any plastic product that has broken or outlived its usefulness. But plastic has a longer life than ever anticipated. As the elements and sunlight turn plastic toys and cigarette filters and everything else plastic into micro and nanoplastics, or MNPs, they find their way into every corner of our planet, from the Mariana Trench in the western North Pacific to Mount Everest in Nepal. And unlike other materials, plastic does not biodegrade. It can take up to 1,000 years. Of course, this has not been verified to break down, but so when it is discarded, it builds up in the environment until it reaches a crisis point. And here we are. If the current annual production of 430 million tons of plastic is not cut back drastically, it will continue to make our current planetary boundaries worsen, including climate change, ocean acidification, and biodiversity loss. These planetary boundaries are really a framework that describe limits to the impacts of human activities on the Earth's systems. And beyond these boundaries, the environment may not be able to self-regulate anymore, meaning the planet would leave its period of stability. As the International Plastics Treaty negotiations continue, they call for shifting focus from waste management to plastic's broader planetary and human health impacts. Researchers around the world say that it is imperative to declare a global emergency to deal with plastic pollution. And I might just add here that we meet once a year on climate change. That's the Conference of the Parties, or COP. And then we are meeting twice a year to deal with the plastic pollution. So initially, plastic was thought to be harmless, but actually there are still some who proclaim that plastic is inert. But of course, this assertion is unscientific and profoundly wrong. Plastic is a product of the fossil fuel industry, mostly crude oil, but other common components include coal, natural gas, cellulose, starch, and salt. And then there's the other part of the plastic recipe. There are roughly 16,000 chemicals used to produce different properties for different plastics, like resistance to sunlight, make them more malleable, shatterproof, etc. But 4,000 of those 16,000 chemicals have been identified as toxic, and very few have ever been tested for their synergistic effects or a combination of chemicals. And you may ask, as Judith has talked about already, is plastic really recyclable? You may have heard that California has recently sued fossil fuel giant ExxonMobil for decades of lying and misleading the public about the efficacy of plastic recycling when they knew that this was never viable and would do little or nothing to stem the enormous volume of plastic waste that ends up in the environment. Notes from an early plastics industry boardroom conversation said roughly, quote, "If we can sell the public on recycling, we can sell plastic." Over the past year or so, there has been a keen interest in researching how plastics, and especially MNPs, created by the degradation of plastic products, may be impacting human health. And for that matter, all living things, including plants. Their ubiquitous presence in the environment has researchers developing more and more sophisticated tools to detect their presence in our air, our water, and our soil, with a special interest in the micro and nanoplastic particles. No one ever thought that the chemicals in plastic would leach into the environment or into the food packaged in plastic. And if anyone quietly considered that possibility, they probably felt that the amount would be so small as to be immaterial. Well, that is not the case. We know now that even infinitesimally low levels of some of the chemicals in plastics can disrupt hormone signaling and contribute to cancers, heart disease, neurological and immune disorders, and reproductive problems. Quite alarming is the new body, it's this emerging new research showing that MNPs are accumulating in critical human organs. And though the health consequences of these tiny plastic particles is not yet well known, they are being found in our livers, kidney, placenta, testicles and semen, bone marrow, joints, blood, arterial plaque, and the brain. The brain contains 10 to 20 times more nanoplastics than other organs. Nobody is sure why, but it even has scientists using the unscientific word scary. We process our food in plastic and then wrap it in plastic. We grow our food in soils contaminated with plastic, harvest shellfish and fish from our oceans and lakes with plastic in their flesh, and use plastic tubing in the milking operations for dairy foods and enjoy our favorite yogurt in its plastic container. Even salt and honey are found to contain plastic from environmental contamination and processing methods. The only way to stop this migration of plastic into our bodies is to stop producing it, except for those very small number of critical uses in medicine. Children are always more vulnerable to environmental exposures than adults. And their bodies are still growing. They have undeveloped immune detoxification and elimination systems, and they live in their environments quite differently than adults. They have this hand-to-mouth behavior. They touch and taste and smell everything. And children, unfortunately, are more highly exposed to plastics as well. Think about those plastic packaged snacks and candy, plastic tubes of food, plastic bottles and sippy cups, plastic lunch boxes filled with prepackaged snacks and sandwiches in baggies, and of course, a plastic water bottle, synthetic clothing, and stuffed toys, plastic toys, think Barbies, they're made of PVC, sportswear and gear, and the list goes on and on. From my perspective, if we're going to limit exposure to plastic in consumer products, let's start with the stuff our kids are exposed to every day. So, what does this all have to do with cities and towns? Let's take a look at the increasing use of artificial turf at schools and municipal parks. Artificial turf is a multi-layered fossil fuel-based plastic product, which includes hundreds of hazardous chemicals in the plastic carpet and the blades, as well as in the infill material. In addition to the chemicals typically found in these fields, the use of per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, is widespread in the manufacture of this product. A recent study by PEER, which is Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, showed PFAS residues on the hands of every student athlete that they tested. PFAS is a class of about 15,000 chemicals, often called forever chemicals, which have confirmed links to serious health impacts. As a plastic carpet, grass blades, and infill material breaks down into tiny plastic particles due to friction from field use and exposure to UV radiation from the sun and other sources of degradation, MNPs are shed into the surrounding environment, contaminating soil, air, and water sources. An average 80,000 square foot field contains 40,000 pounds of plastic carpeting and 400,000 pounds of infill, and it is estimated that as much as 3,000 pounds of plastic are shed off those fields annually. Players on artificial turf are subject to all pathways of exposure to MNPs, including inhalation, skin absorption, and accidental ingestion. You can see on the slide some of our summer interns collecting samples on a turf field for a study being conducted by Mount Sinai School of Medicine, which was funded by the NIH. The study involved sampling the infill material as well as the plastic grass blades. And so I'm going to finish here and thank you for the opportunity to share some of our concerns. And for more information, please visit grassrootsinfo.org/artificial turf. We have a ton of information up there, including a digest of the independent science on all of those chemicals that are found in infill material, as well as PFAS and the plastics and the heat issues and the injury issues, and it goes on and on and on. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Patty. Our next speaker is Shannon Perry. Shannon Perry is the Deputy Sustainability Officer for the City of Santa Monica, California. Shannon promotes public engagement to improve sustainability, which exists at the intersection of environmental quality, economic vitality, and social equity. Shannon received her master's degree in urban planning from the University of California, Los Angeles, after double majoring in environmental science policy and management. Please welcome Shannon Perry.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me. And thank you, Patty, for setting this stage with such thoughtful and well-informed information about the issues surrounding plastics. My job in Santa Monica is to look at opportunities that are most highly leveraged for local government to address these significant issues. Just so we're all on the same page, the city of Santa Monica has about 90,000 residents. We're on the west edge of the United States, surrounded on three sides by the city of Los Angeles and the west side by the Pacific Ocean. This year, we're celebrating 30 years of sustainability in Santa Monica. And I share this piece of information with you because I think that it's important to realize as we address these plastic issues, it sounds so simple to do things like ban the bag, switch to reusables. And it is simple and it's imperative and it's urgent and it takes time. And I'm a firm believer that the perfect should not be the enemy of the good. And sometimes starting small with what is politically palatable is the way to move towards much larger, much more impactful outcomes. Here in Santa Monica, we focus on being a sustainable city, so really going beyond just green. And I thought it was valuable for you to understand this core notion so that you can understand the context in which we do our work. So Santa Monica uses the power of community to enhance our resources, prevent harm to the natural environment and human health, and benefit the social and economic well-being of our community for the sake of current and future generations. This is our council adopted mission statement, and that really helps us get our work done. Within that framework, we have three primary environmental goals that we wrap our policies and programs around. The first is water self-sufficiency, the second is zero waste, and the third is carbon neutrality. A lot of our single-use plastic work falls under our zero waste efforts, but there's significant implications for plastic use in terms of carbon emissions as well as water use. In Santa Monica, all of our sustainability work is codified in our sustainable city plan. I think this is a really valuable tool for sustainable cities. So I'm going to take a moment to tell you about this so that you understand the context within which we do our plastics work. Our sustainable city plan was adopted in the early 1990s, and it establishes 9 goal areas for sustainability outcomes in our community. It has performance metrics at the core so that we can track our progress over time. We report on the outcomes in our sustainable city plan every 2 years so that if we're not moving in the right direction, we can have a meaningful conversation with our council and identify the places where we need to prioritize staff time and resources. Our sustainable city plan not only covers municipal operations, but our community as a whole. And I think this is really important so that as a local government, we're not having a conversation about, are we going to address plastics in our environment? We're going to have a conversation about how are we going to do it? And then we're going to talk about how effective it was. So having an overarching sustainable city plan or sustainability document allows you to establish a landscape within which you can do meaningful policy work. There are 11 guiding principles in our sustainable city plan, but 3 that really tie to our plastics work. One is the idea that sustainability guides city policy. It seems fairly straightforward, but having your council adopt a statement as such is really helpful and empowers the work that you can do next. The second thing is that the city's committed to our procurement decisions, which minimize negative environmental and social impacts. That is plastic. As Patty just walked us through, plastic pollution has significant impacts on our environment and on human health. And then finally, we employ in our guiding principles the value of the precautionary principle. We all know that we live in a world now where science has been weaponized. You can find peer-reviewed science that says anything the person who funded the science wanted it to say. And so having the precautionary principle in our guiding principles allows us to be more to move forward in the absence of what I think we no longer have, which is scientific certainty. This is a roadmap of the work that we have done. You'll see efforts around single-use plastics started in the early 2000s and continue all the way to today. I'll take you through a few of the key efforts that were most successful. I think this is also a place where you can really see the beginnings of a concept of circular economy. So for us, we started a toxic use reduction program in the early 1990s. We started looking at integrated pest management and reducing chemical pesticides and herbicides from the city in 1996. We began looking at requirements for recycled content paper and things like that in the early 2000s. And then we started to think about plastic pollution. Why are we thinking about plastic pollution? You look at this beautiful coastal city with a world famous pier, the world's first solar powered Ferris wheel, meaningful successes around vehicle electrification and other things. And you realize that a coastal city is the embodiment of triple bottom line sustainability. So here in Santa Monica, tourism is driven by the health of our aquatic ecosystem and the cleanliness of our beaches. People come to Santa Monica because they want to walk on our beaches, they want to swim in our ocean. And when they come, they stay in hotels and they shop and they eat, and they even park their vehicle. And this is really important because those 3 activities are the 3 most significant contributors to our city's general fund: transit occupancy tax, which is a hotel bed tax, parking revenue, and sales tax. And those general fund revenues are then used to fund programs for seniors, programs for children, programs to protect our coastal ecosystems. So it really is a cycle where the health of our bay and the health of our beaches contributes to the health of our community. So what's the problem? This is the problem. These are not doctored images. This is not AI. This is called the first flush. And the first flush is the impact of the most significant first rain. It clears out the streets, it clears out the storm drains, and this is what it looks like. In a sustainable city in the early aughts, this is what we were dealing with whenever it rained. I don't know about you, but I would be somewhere between heartbroken and pissed off if I showed up on my vacation and my beach looked like this. Same thing if I live here. It doesn't matter if you live, work, play, or visit in Santa Monica, you do not want this. It's not good for the environment, it's not good for human health, and it's not good for aquatic animals. We began to track the materials that were being picked up by volunteers in our beach cleanups. We've got these kids, they're coming to the beach. All they want to do is help take care of their community, and they are picking up thousands of pounds of styrofoam. In order for styrofoam to hit the thousands of pounds, you have to imagine how much there was. So what did we do? In 2007, we passed a polystyrene foam ban. What does this mean? This means that all of the food containers in the city could not be made of single-use foamed plastic. In 2007, this was sort of the way that people were thinking most about this. Get rid of the styrofoam. It's the most dangerous type of packaging for packaging materials, for food service. We worked with our business community. We worked with Cisco. We had multi-day workshops where we brought in not only the restaurants who'd be affected by the ban, but also the largest food service to-go container companies. And we said, we're doing this. We weren't asking them if we should do it. We told them we were doing it. And we asked them what we needed. What did they need from us in order for them to be able to deliver compliant packages to our community? As our single-use food service ban was taking effect, our businesses, we hired a staff person whose sole job was to provide technical support. And we turned our attention to single-use plastic bags because they were clogging our waterways and our trees and ending up on our beaches. While this first step was super important, you all know what happened. The industry capitalized on the loophole in our ban that were lightweight, or what we called tissue plastic bags, and started to call these heavier weight plastic bags reusable. I don't know about you, but I find that disingenuous at best, but it was a fact. So at this point, our city did something. We worked with other California cities to figure out a way to more effectively ban single-use plastic bags. And instead of every city in the state funding their own master environmental assessment to justify their ordinance, Santa Monica and a number of other cities funded a master environmental impact assessment that could be used by any city across the state. And this really made it easier for cities to ban the bag. It still took time. We tried in 2016 to close that loophole, and it wasn't until 2024, September of 2024, that the state of California was able to take the effort of a number of small municipalities and effectively pass a single-use plastic bag ban. So I point that out just to say small efforts done diligently in the face of major corporate impacts takes time. One of the most important things that happened during this time is we had some time to reflect on our disposable foodware ordinance from 2007, and we really expanded it in 2018. So we moved to straws and utensils were plastic straws and utensils were banned, and all straws and utensils were only available upon request. We moved from non-plastic to only biodegradable materials because we found that that was the most effective way to ensure a end-of-life solution that was best for the products. We initially exempted cups and lids because we couldn't find a non-plastic top that met our safety standards. We subsequently have been able to do that after hosting a design competition with Starbucks and others. And then we just extended our ban to include plastics, bioplastics, and others. One of the reasons we included bioplastics, because they're fake, they're not real. All they are is plastic. But they're the type of plastic that jams up our recycling systems. And so it looks like it's compostable, it looks like it's plastic, and what it ultimately ends up doing is causing plastic pollution that causes huge portions of a recycling supply chain to end up getting landfilled. So we were really explicit about that. We had a really successful campaign around Hold the Plastic. We had a really successful campaign around eliminating the plastic straws. We really worked at this point with our community to prioritize bring your own. So we really did a strong push for reusables. We gave out tens of thousands of reusable bags. We gave out reusable sporks. We gave out cups and mugs. We really wanted to prioritize this message that the highest and best practice was to bring your own. Then COVID happened. And I'll just be transparent. Like when COVID happened, a lot of single-use plastic and non-compliant material made its way back into our restaurants and food service areas. And it's taken us the last 2 years to really get our compliance back up in a meaningful way. Now, our message really is not around what not to do, but it's really much more now around what to do. So we really focus on how to host zero waste events, how to have a sustainable holiday season, how to normalize bring your own. We banned the use of single-use plastics in the city and at city-sponsored events. And we complemented that with the installation of water bottle refilling stations and efforts to give away thousands of reusable water bottles. We put in place requirements for city-sponsored events to also only give away meaningful products, non-plastic products that support sustainable lifestyles. So in conclusion, there's, I think, a natural hierarchy to these things. Obviously, a polystyrene ban is the first place to start. Single-use plastic bag ban is simple and easy. I would say now those should really be complemented with single-use plastic water bottle bans. And the thing I encourage people to think about there is making sure that your single-use plastic bottle ban does come along with efforts to look at what you are replacing. You want to replace water with water, not water with soda. And then food service container bans. All of these things are really important. When we went back to council with our food service container ban, we had a doctor come to stand at the dais and in front of council holding this tiny little piece of plastic. And he started by saying, I love plastic. Plastic saves lives. And we were all wondering where he was going with this. And he said, I just hate it in my environment, and I hate it in my waterways, and I hate it bioaccumulating in lungs and in breast tissue. But where I love plastic is in heart stents. So let's focus on using small amounts of plastic in the right places to save lives. And remember that it's a petroleum chemical and that it shouldn't be in all of these other places. I thought that was a really powerful moment for putting in context the work that we do. I think local government leadership really does aggregate up to these statewide bans, which are really valuable. And then that is the invitation for local governments to go far beyond these single-use bans and really start to look at comprehensive zero waste policies where you're looking at mandatory organics, recycling, bring your own campaigns, et cetera. And then also just remembering that plastic is petroleum, and so your efforts to reduce carbon emissions are essential in this process. For us, our final work is around extended producer responsibility. It's around sustainable procurement. We're working at the local and regional level to move our circular economy practices forward. Everything from paper product purchases to our renewable natural gas purchases. This type of closed loop procurement really helps local governments drive markets. In aggregate, local governments have huge purchasing power. So really making sure that we are not only reducing our single-use plastic, but also creating the market for products that fill that void is really, really important. We are working now on a zero waste pier in time for Los Angeles to host the Olympics in 2028. We're working diligently with cities across the region to have a plastic-free Olympics, and we are turning our attention to artificial turf, as Patty mentioned, in such a thoughtful and detailed way. We are responsible for sports fields in our community, and for decades we have chosen not to offer rebates to residents who are replacing their landscaping with plastic grass in order to conserve water. We made that decision about 12 years ago, but now we're moving into the decision about how and in what circumstances to address artificial turf and its installation in our community. With that, I will share this picture of the bag person. This is a local high school student who comes to our council meetings whenever we're trying to address single-use plastic waste. I think it's a good reminder that, all of these issues, litter, beach pollution, microplastics, nanoplastics, hormone disruptors, bioaccumulation, they are all ultimately about the health and safety of humans and the health and safety of the environments that support them, and that it is an imperative of local government to use our position to protect people and the planet from what I think is egregious plastic pollution. So with that, I'll end my presentation.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you so much. Remarkable work that you're doing in Santa Monica. It's very inspiring. So thank you for being part of the webinar today and for sharing that presentation with us. Just great. Our next speaker is Councilwoman Maureen Porras. Maureen Porras is the incoming Vice Mayor. Congratulations, Maureen, in the city of Doral, Florida. She's an immigration attorney, a community advocate, a global humanitarian. She's championed numerous plastic-free initiatives in Doral, reflecting her commitment to sustainability, environmental protection, and creating a stronger, more inclusive community. We are honored to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning and also good afternoon. It's a pleasure and honor to be here with all of you. I'm Councilwoman Porras, incoming Vice Mayor of the city of Doral in Florida. And just a little bit of a background introduction to the city of Doral. Despite Doral being the home of the Trump National Resort, the home of the Miami-Dade Republican Committee, we are a very green city. And we are actually very committed to investing in an environmentally friendly future. In fact, our city, similar to Santa Monica, we have about 90,000 residents, and we were incorporated about 23 years ago. And since the incorporation, the city has really focused on adopting sustainable and green policies that align with, the mission of reducing waste and to elevate Doral's status as a green city. And these are the types of initiatives that we believe as a city are going to benefit not just the environment, but also businesses, our quality of life, health, and our future as well. As was mentioned, I am an immigration attorney, and I'm also the legal director of a global nonprofit that provides immigration and refugee resettlement work. I've been working as a public interest lawyer since 2016, practicing member of the Florida Bar since 2014. And I decided to run for office in 2020. I actually ran for state rep, was not successful in that race, but as part of my education on what the issues or what the most pressing issues in Florida were, I took a Catalyst Miami Community Leadership on the Environment class, which was a 10-week course focused on really educating the community and developing environmental leaders. And it taught, all of the students and participants on how to do advocacy, what the issues were. Many of you know here in Florida, we have a lot of water quality issues. And other issues that I'll get into in a little bit. But as part of my, let's say, preparation to truly represent residents and really learn about all the issues facing our community, I decided to do that environmental leadership course, which was a free course offered by Miami-Dade County. And then in December 2022, I ran for a vacant seat here at the local level in the city council in the city of Doral, and that is when I took office, and I have been proudly representing residents of Doral for the last 2 years. As part of my commitment as a candidate, I was committed to ensuring that we would continue to build a resilient and to continue to pass and adopt environmentally friendly policies that would help our environment and our city. Some of the challenges, of course, that we face here on this side of the US in Florida are very strict preemption laws from the Florida legislature. They have a long history of preempting local governments from really exercising control over certain issues, including environmental issues. And, despite this, despite the fact that we at the local level have really the best knowledge and the best pulse of what the needs are of our community. Preemption is something that here in Miami-Dade County, we fight a lot, and we are very big on home rule, but the Florida legislature hasn't been as friendly. I mean, they've banned us from they preempted us from being able to ban plastics, styrofoam, and just and adopting different protections for our communities. The other challenges are the county laws. We are also governed by the Miami-Dade County, and Doral has unfortunately been the home and has had the burden of having a waste to energy facility or an incinerator over the last 40 years. So even prior to the incorporation of the city, we've had this facility in our backyard. It's caused a ton of problems. It uses very outdated technology. In the 40 years that it was operating, and hadn't been updated. And that facility is county owned and operated. So in other words, as a city, we don't have any control or say over whether that facility will continue operating in our city or not. And in fact, it was actually drawn into the charter that in order for us to incorporate, we had to accept that that facility was there, and we really couldn't do anything to move it out, essentially. But there was actually a massive fire in the facility that actually reopened that negotiation that happened last year in February. It was actually during the same Sunday as the Super Bowl. And so we had, it was a total destruction of the facility. It's not operating, but the county does intend on rebuilding it. And so right now, the city is negotiating with the county to see if we can relocate this incinerator outside of the city of Doral and outside of the proximity to any community. It's been a very rough, tough negotiation. We've had lobbyists, lawyers, advocacy. We've done everything possible to convince our county commissioners to move this facility outside of our city and away from any community. The current county mayor is someone that is actually a very open to sustainability. And so she has tried to help us, and she actually eventually wants to build sort of a move to zero waste, a zero waste plan. But in the meantime, wants to build sort of a recycling center. And so there's been several different ideas that have been tossed around in lieu of this incinerator. But the more we talk about it, it looks like they're going to be rebuilding an incinerator. And in fact, next month is when the county is going to be meeting to talk about where this facility will be rebuilt. I'm sure many of you know, Florida is one of the states that has the most incinerators in the US. Despite this, we are focusing on adopting those policies, environmentally friendly policies, educating our community, and working collaboratively with our community. We have taken a lot of action. We have passed initiatives and policies that are allowed, and also a start to where we would like to see our city be. And we, of course, want to make sure that we elevate our city as a green city. Doral, as I mentioned, has done a lot of different things. We've actually been recognized Tree City for over 15 consecutive years by the Arbor Day Foundation. We have passed and adopted policies supporting different environmental programs, including Plastic Free 305 program, and joining the program to reduce plastic use within the city's facilities. We also work with vendors that use alternatives to plastic. We have passed resolutions to replace plastic bags with biodegradable bags. We've commissioned studies on alternative energy for transportations, and we have a citywide integrated sustainability plan. We've also worked with different groups. We've engaged the community. We have an environmental advisory board. We work with students, with schools. We do cleanups. And we work with environmental groups to really try to do as much as possible to reduce waste, plastic, and to become a resilient city. So with that, I know that we are almost out of time. That is what we are doing at the city, and we're very proud, and we hope to be able to continue doing that as well.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I have to learn how to roll my R's like you do. It just sounds great. And congratulations for your work. It must be very tough with those state requirements and the preemptions that they have. So good for you for hanging in there and doing all that you're doing. We really appreciate it. Okay, our next speaker is Brian Thompson. Brian was an award-winning reporter covering New York, New Jersey for NBC New York for 27 years. Since his retirement a year and a half ago, he's focused on his first passion, which is the environment, while leading his town as an environmental commissioner to take first-in-the-nation actions to combat plastic pollution. Brian also serves on the National Advisory Board for Beyond Plastics. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you so much, Doug, and I'll try to shorten my remarks as well. But the first thing I want to say is my town is living proof that you don't have to be a liberal bastion to pass smart environmental laws. And you might say, why? Well, for the past 3 elections, including a week ago, a majority of the residents here have voted for Donald Trump. And yet, in 2018, we passed what we believe was the strongest single plastic law in the nation, covered straws, covered plastic bags, and covered styrofoam food containers, all in one local ordinance. We didn't know of any other place that had done that. They'd done one here, one there sort of thing. And it was passed unanimously by our borough commission. It took about 2 more years for the state legislature, controlled by Democrats, to pass what really was even a better law because it was more comprehensive, but we were first. And you can fast forward now to this past summer. We were the maybe 4th, 5th town in the state to pass Skip the Stuff. You've already heard about that, the plastic that you get in your takeout food container with your containers and probably just populate in your drawer like bunny rabbits. So we passed that this summer unanimously. And then here's the biggie, other first of the nation, we believe, item, and that is our construction dust ordinance. Bottom line, you saw a Trex board for your outdoor deck, for example, a 2x6. What do you get out of it? You get sawdust, plastic sawdust. Instant microplastics is what you get, not something that degrades from the sun, from rolling around on the street or in a rocky quarry or whatever. Instant microplastics come from sawing that vinyl PVC piping. In fact, Doug, let's run that story. I want you to show that I got a reporter friend of mine going back to when I was a reporter and let you get a better real look at this.
The Jersey Shore community is taking a stand against uncontained waste at home construction sites and the pollution they bring.
The action comes as developers continue to produce waves of new homes to keep up with soaring demand. NBC 10 Jersey Shore Bureau reporter Ted Greenberg has more.
There's a lot of pollution and contamination.
She has some collected in a bottle, but it's the uncontained microplastics waste from construction sites that worries Sherry Lilienfeld.
The construction is very positive for our area, but with all the construction comes a problem that we need to handle.
This is the stuff that we're talking about. It looks like snow, and it's not. It's a microcontaminants. I kayak, and I could see it floating in the bay.
With new houses going up practically everywhere along the Jersey Shore, Members of the Sustainable Margate Green Team have been sounding the alarm about pollution spreading beyond work sites
Be conscious of it, be aware of it.
and urging the city to take action.
It's basically going in the air, in the ground, and in our stormwater.
Never had any information on, it being an issue.
Local leaders in Margate are crafting a new law requiring contractors to take steps to keep debris contained and out of the environment. How will it be enforced?
That's the question we're still working with. Who is going to enforce it? We are currently in the education process.
We look to see if any other communities have anything like this. We didn't find anything, so we may be the first.
The city is also set to distribute these flyers to construction crews. They include lists of recommended practices in both English and Spanish.
Don't leave it for the environment to take away. You clean it up. We're just asking them to be responsible.
I'm all for it. Whatever guidelines we have to follow, we're all for it. We clean up our sites every day. We do the best to keep it clean.
An ongoing building boom driving up efforts to keep construction site waste under control. Ted Greenberg, NBC 10 News.
Now, if that doesn't show how bad the problem is, if you think of every construction site where plastic is being cut, I don't know what will. But here's the rub. They didn't pass it as a law. I heard about it online. I tracked down Sherry Lilienfeld, and she told me what they tried to do, and I brought it to our commissioners. We have 3 councilmen, commissioners, whatever you want to call them in Monmouth Beach, and to our environmental commission. Environmental Commission said, yeah, go for it. See if we can get the council to pass it. Went to our mayor and to one of our council members. I said, look at this problem. And you know what? They said it's a problem because we live right on the shore. Matter of fact, I'm going to do something a little unconventional, Doug. That's the view out my window of the Shrewsbury window, if you can see that. Okay. And just think, homes being constructed right on the edge of the Shrewsbury, where will all that dust go? Right in there. Plastic dust, sawdust, dust from construction materials, when you cut up sheetrock, anything like that. So let's show some more pictures, Doug, if we can. Just these are the pictures that were used in that story that Ted did. And by the way, that story he did also ran in New York on the NBC station in New York, Channel 4. So it got a lot of coverage statewide, if you will. And now we're working with Surfrider, with Beyond Plastics New Jersey, with Save Barnegat Bay, and some other groups who have heard about this effort. And they want to bring it statewide, at least to as many communities as possible. And once that happens, to our legislature for a possible statewide law. That may be a couple of years down the road, but we hope that's coming. That's what we're trying to do. And so what I want to say to you more than anything else is that grassroots efforts can make a difference. This was totally grassroots. It was coordinated in the sense of trying to get the story done, getting the pictures from Sherry, sharing them with my council, which then passed the first, we believe, law in the nation, followed a couple of weeks later by, what I want to say, Longport on the Jersey Shore, and also by Ventnor on the Jersey Shore, and Egg Harbor City on the Jersey Shore has passed it on first reading unanimously. So it's gaining momentum. And now we're trying to spread the word to as many towns as possible. We have Surfrider now kind of coordinating all of this. And we think we can make this difference, not just in one small town, but across New Jersey, to keep these instant microplastics out of our watershed, out of our air, because they also blow into the air, and off the ground and away from nature. So think about that. And at the same time, I want to say that I reached out to Rutgers University because they have an environmental division. And I made contact with somebody there, and I asked, can you guys actually quantify how much microplastics may be in that hand or when you cut a board. And she thinks they may be able to do it. They may do the research for us. I don't have that commitment yet, but she's interested. But these are the same people who worked with Columbia University to tell us just last January that there are 240,000 nanoplastics in a 1 liter bottle of water. I'm sure most of us have heard about that when that news came out last winter. 240,000 nanoplastics in a liter bottle of plastic water. So in an average plastic bottle, about 120,000 is the way I figure it. So the same people, they know how to do it. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed. They'll do that research for us so that as we spread the word, we will have a specific database, not just pictures, which are great, but a database to show them these are how many nanoplastics you're releasing into the environment if you allow your contractors to do this. All they got to do is put up a tent, a vacuum on the saw, and a tarp underneath and clean it up every day. Cost them a couple $100. Our mayor asked our 2 biggest builders in town, is this okay? They said, yeah, sure. We got no problem with that. I will say one thing. I did go by not one of their construction sites, but a different one today in our town, and they weren't following the law. So what did I do? Hello, code official. Go to the corner of River Avenue and Johnson Street, and there's a table saw, and there are the cuttings on the ground. So it takes citizen enforcement for something like this too. That's really it, Doug and everybody. And thank you for listening. And I hope that you can be inspired by this. And please reach out to me if you have any more questions, or if you do initiate some ordinance like this, we'd love to track it and give you credit.
Thank you, Brian. Very inspiring. And the pictures are just horrific. I mean, really, when you sent me those pictures, I was like, holy Caruso, this is really a much bigger problem than we thought. And of course, somebody in the chat has said, what about not using plastic in construction? And that's a whole another discussion, and probably a good subject for another webinar. So thank you again, Brian, for all your work and for being part of our program today. Our final speaker today is Jamie Harkins. Jamie serves as the Sustainability Senior Manager for Circular Economy at the City of Boulder, where she manages a team focusing on policy development, program development, innovative pilot projects, and leads the strategic planning of Boulder's circular economy efforts. Jamie has a master's degree in environmental economics and policy from Duke University, and also served recently as the mayor of Lafayette, Colorado. So she knows all about local government at the local level. Jamie, it's all yours. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much and welcome. I promise I'll try to keep it quick. But as Doug mentioned, I've been with the City of Boulder about 15 years. And it was back in 2019. I just want to give you super high level context here that we started shifting our thinking away from we've been working towards zero waste since the 90s. We are one of those liberal bastions, as I'm sure most of you know. But we really started shifting our thinking to what's next. How can Boulder, we were really grappling with this idea that we can't recycle our way out of the climate crisis. A lot of the reasons you've heard today. And so we really started working with some consultants, and really looking at how a city can play a role in rethinking how materials are produced, used, and discarded from a super fundamental systems change way. And so it really did start to shift a lot of our work, which I will be talking about today. And so we did start back in 2012. Looking at plastics. We had a bunch of community activists looking for a bag fee or a bag ban. We did pass a bag fee, a 10-cent fee that reduced use at food stores by 70%. And that fee, we thought it was pretty successful, but we faced some really difficult, you heard today, state preemptions and we really recognize the need for a statewide approach to plastics rather than city by city. And so we started our lobbying efforts, and over the years, and I don't want to pretend like this didn't take 6, 7 years of lobbying over time, but we started to build the knowledge about this within the Colorado legislature as a coalition of cities. And we did in 2021 get the Colorado Plastic Pollution Reduction Act passed. There were 4 parts to this law. The first was sort of a modeling of Boulder and Aspen, a couple cities who had bag fees. That went statewide the first year. And then the next year, after 12 months, we did phase into a ban on all plastic checkout bags, and a ban on polystyrene food containers. And then for those of us on this webinar who are super wonky like I am, and I know Maureen, you mentioned state preemptions. We all love those. It was sort of my baby to get this preemption repealed because Colorado also had one that limited cities from regulating plastics. It was in actually a recycling law from like the 80s. And so we did get that repeal put into this act as well. And so that just went into effect this summer. That repeal happened July 2024. And so now cities have that ability. But in addition to policy, we've had a lot of wins. I mean, we have gone on to get some additional policy wins, including a truth in labeling around compostable products and also a producer responsibility for packaging program, which launches in 2026. It's very exciting. But we also started to think about in Boulder, you know, in addition to policy, how can a city play a role in accelerating this transition? And in Boulder, you know, we also have a great startup culture. And Boulder as a city organization has a history of sort of funding. I ran back in the day the Boulder Energy Challenge, where we actually fund startups. And so we had this idea to use some grant money we received in 2021 to bring a reusable takeout container company into the city of Boulder and like support that in a very significant financial way. We issued an RFP and we used that money to support the purchase of containers, staffing, technology development, collection points, marketing, and more. We funded this company. It was called Repeater at the time. It was later purchased by Deliver Zero, which you're seeing their containers here. So over 2 years, we used grant money to support them and help them scale. And now they're operating in the Denver area as well. And then after the grant funds, we continue to support them in the form of integrating their product into our business advising service that goes out and works with restaurants. We're doing incentives for their sales folks. We help them with marketing from the city. So we're really trying to help them scale, which is what at the city level, we've really noticed that businesses in this field really struggle with. This is really hard work. And as you've heard today, it's really hard to change the status quo. And so I'm not going to pretend like this is a raging success. I think we have 15 restaurants in the program. There have been a lot of barriers over time of how to get reusable, refillable takeout container program going, but we're doing it. We really believe in Boulder that it can't be on the consumer. Like for this to be successful, we have to make these options, reusable options, as easy as the disposable option. You know, I don't think personally it should be on all of us to bring our own cup, bring our own container, bring our own silverware. That's just not the culture we live in right now. So while I do that, we have to think about at a consumer level how we get these options to folks that it's not an extra burden for them to use. And so in addition to like directly funding a startup, we also have a wide array of direct financial incentives, which Boulder has relied on for a long time to advance our zero waste work. The first is a flexible reuse incentive. So this is up to $2,000 for restaurants or businesses in Boulder to really do anything around a reusable system. Install a dishwasher, buy dishes if they're using disposables for dine-in eating. We will give them money to like implement Deliver Zero in their restaurant. So it's really up to them how they want to use this incentive, but it's been very popular. And then we have event incentives. So Boulder is an event town. We have a lot of races, a lot of festivals. And so we have really started looking at how do we make those as low waste as possible. And so we've been bringing in partners. We try to attract partners to town. Our World and Hiccup are both operating now here, and they're both more event focused. And so we will pay for the entire use of like our cups or Hiccup. Hiccup focuses on races. So we just had our first marathon that used entirely Hiccup cups rather than paper cups. And it's up to $5,000 an event, but typically they come in a lot lower than that. But we will, this year we funded, I think, any event that has a special event permit, we will fund their use of these companies. And so you can just see some stats there of how many single-use items we've avoided. This is cumulative over the last 2 years. I don't have the numbers just for this year, but we're really, really trying to avoid the landfill altogether. And so what's next? You know, this still is a struggle. Our city council has given us direction to explore additional regulations on single-use plastics. We are, on the staff side, thinking about how we can take that policy idea and really include some things that we haven't seen yet in cities, including a requirement for the future. Maybe it's 5 years down the road that, you know, reusable options are available to consumers as an option. We haven't seen, you know, we've seen cities that adopted reusables for dine-in, but not takeout. And so it's sort of an evolution of like building the companies, building the market, and now can we have policy come in and support that by making it a level playing field across the city? Some of our next steps are that we want to do this. We really want to get some information on what the most problematic plastics are. Like if we're going to pursue banning something, our restaurants, as they are in most of your communities, are really struggling right now. And so what are actually the most problematic plastics? And, you know, before we decide what to do about them. So we're thinking of launching, or we are going to launch, a single-use plastics survey of the community based on the UK's big plastic count. Obviously, theirs is for the whole country, but we're only going to do it for Boulder, but it's a 1-week survey throughout the community to really gather that data about what plastics are actually coming into everyone's houses on a week, 2-week basis. So we're going to do that this year. We're starting to integrate Upstream's chart reuse tool, which really models the return on investment for restaurants on reusable options. And so that's another data collection tool we're going to use this year. And then I just wanted to end on this point that I know this might be kind of controversial, but we're really looking at Boulder to leapfrog kind of all disposables. We had a very long focus on transitioning to compostable serviceware. And then we ran into our compost servicer or processor here on the Front Range in Colorado, stopped accepting those items. That happened last year. And so now all of those items are going in the landfill. And so that is a very difficult situation for us to navigate over the past 1.5 to 2 years. A lot of restaurants are frustrated. They made this transition and now it's going in the trash. We are currently exploring other options for processing those, believe me, but it's been very difficult. And so it just feeds into our really hardcore belief in Boulder that we really need to kind of skip this disposable culture, or try to change our disposable culture. We can't skip it, but it's just so ingrained in how we consume these days, and how can us as a city really try to work on changing that status quo. So that's our focus right now. It's very difficult work. I'm not going to pretend it's easy or it goes fast, but we're trying some solutions and we're learning some lessons. I'm happy to talk to anyone offline about additional initiatives we have. This QR code will take you to our Circular Boulder page where you can learn more about what we're doing. But I will wrap up there.
Thank you, Jamie, so much for your work and honest approach to how difficult some of these things are. You know, one step ahead, half a step back. You know, we lurch forward and eventually we will get there. Okay, so the universal question is about enforcement. How are you going about this? And I'd just like to go around the room. starting with you, Shannon. Talk about briefly, because we don't have a lot of time. Talk about enforcement of some of these policies.
Yeah, I mean, enforcement has changed over the years. We really think of proactive education as our first form of enforcement. We are not trying to do this just with a stick. So we really have done carrot and stick approach. So for each of our single-use plastic bans, we worked really closely with our business community. We ran community campaigns with business leaders speaking to the business communities about the why for these bans. And then we did obviously education and outreach to residents and visitors around why this is happening, why they're paying a fee, why their food container might look different. And then after the first year, we had a designated staff person whose job it was to enforce sustainability specific bans. They would go out 3 times. The first 2 times they would educate a business on the why again. And then the third time they would issue a citation. Subsequent, after the years, that kind of high touch education focused enforcement just turns straight to code compliance. So as Brian mentioned, now people in Santa Monica, if they see single-use plastic, if they see straws, if they're given if they're given utensils without requesting them, they put in a call or they place a 311 request, which is our city's online app-based tool. We also work really closely. A lot of we do spot checks, but we do spot checks to say thank you, not to say you're doing it wrong. So we bring donut deliveries to restaurants who are really modeling best practices because we feel like the culture is often around banning things and hearing what you're doing wrong. And we're trying to really change that narrative to celebrating people who've changed their own business practices and are doing it well.
Excellent idea. Jamie, you want to adopt?
Yeah. It's a
question?
wonderful question because it's really difficult. We did also sort of operate on a complaint basis for our bag fee back in 2012. I set up a hotline for folks to call. I never got a single call, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. But we are very fortunate in that at the time, Zero Waste team, we have significant funding for our department, our whole climate initiatives department. We have a tax that doesn't sunset, a trash tax. Happy to tell folks about that if you email me. So I do have folks who can pursue enforcement, but our state law that I mentioned, they included no enforcement. So it's on the cities to do anything you want to do with that. So it's absolutely a great question because that's a real problem when I think about it or look at our state law. I will say that we do, with another policy we have in Boulder, our Universal Zero Waste Ordinance, where businesses are required to have all the zero waste services, recycling and composting. We did link enforcement of that to incentives. And so we focused on food-based businesses initially for that policy back when it passed in 2016. And if they filled out their self-reporting to us and sent a picture of all their bins, they were able to access a program where we actually subsidize the purchase of the compostable bin liners that are actually, are pretty expensive. And so we linked that and we had almost 100% compliance with food-based businesses doing that in Boulder. So I'll just throw that out there as an idea. Like, is there a way to link a carrot to some kind of self-reporting or some kind of enforcement mechanism like that?
Yeah, interesting. Brian, I had a question for you, and that is what happens after you collect all this stuff? What happens to it since there is no way, as the person said?
Yeah, and I just posted it to chat. Judy asked that question, and it's very simple. Our ordinance requires that you have to clean it up every day. And remember, it's been caught with either a vacuum or a tarp or both, a tarp underneath, and treat it just as any other construction debris. So if you go by a typical construction site anywhere in America, the contractor can't just throw a piece of 2x4, leftover 2x4 out in the street or into the neighbor's yard next door. He can't take a piece of sheetrock and just throw it into the street, right? Do you know of any place where they can do that? I don't. So they have to clean it up. Same thing with microplastics. In our case, every day you take that tarp or vacuum or both full of microplastics and you properly dispose of it as your town rules require, which usually would be into some sort of container. It might be in that that large cubic container that's going to go to the town dump or the landfill or whatever. It's not perfect, and some of it's going to blow away, of course, and whatever. Even our system is not perfect. We don't know of a perfect system. But when you look at those pictures and realize that most of that stuff is being collected and properly disposed of, as per already existing town regulations, we consider that a win.
Well, you're also raising the awareness, right, among the community because a lot of people don't think about this. I like to hear your construction guy say, "Yeah, you know what? We can do this, not a problem." But he never thought about it before, right? That was the key line. So I think that's great. Patty had a question for you in the chat, and that is, what do you do? Is there an alternative to artificial turf fields? There's a lot of pressure for towns to put up these, fields where you can play on.
The alternative is to understand the simple practices that you use for a heavily used natural grass field. And it's really pretty simple. I can say it in 2 words: aerate and overseed, because all those athletes' feet are just compressing, the soil. And so, soil compression is turf grass's worst enemy. So you aerate it constantly throughout the entire growing season, and you overseed it throughout the entire growing season. And you can have beautiful fields that are natural grass and get rid of that artificial turf. I just have to say one thing in closing, that is that it's really important to educate the next generation. And we are doing an effort right now in the schools, the school districts, where we are asking the purchasing department and copying up the superintendent. And this can also be done on a local municipal level, that a letter goes out to all their vendors that says we will give preference to those vendors who do not use plastic packing materials in the orders that we are submitting, right? And this is a really important thing because packaging and packing materials are a huge percentage of the plastic waste in this country in particular, right? Because we get so many shipments. And so this is where we're going with this. And so that doesn't actually have to be, you don't actually have to go out and make sure that they're doing it. Once you have established this with your vendors, and in fact, some cases we want them to say, we will not accept this shipment with or with plastic packing materials. It's different. You have to differentiate between packaging and packing. We can't tell the manufacturers of computers that they can't use their styrofoam, although we can tell them that because they can use molded paper. Okay, they can use molded paper, but we're not talking about what the actual products are packaged in. We're talking about all the stuff that they put in the boxes that they ship those things in. And it's incredible the amount of waste, plastic waste, and it gets thrown out.
Yeah. Shannon, I see you have your hand up.
I just wanted to share that this is a place where I think local governments really have an opportunity. We just did this, Patty, with our city's Dell computers. We already do obviously our computers meet the highest sustainability standards for their the computers themselves, but they were arriving to us and each individual computer was wrapped in plastic and then it was put in a plastic sleeve. It was molded plastic sleeve, plastic packaging in a cardboard box. And we talked with Dell, and it did cost us a little bit. We made about $1,000 investment to have 100% plastic-free computer delivery. It was amazing. It's molded plastic protecting each device. It's 5 computers per box instead of 1, and there's 0 packaging waste. It was remarkable how responsive they were and how quickly they were able to change their practice. And so I think that really amplifies your observation, which is it needs to go in procurement RFPs from the beginning. Priority will be given to, or solicitations must include. and then just lay out your sustainable practices.
100%.
We
Because
talked-
they want to sell you the stuff. And if they have to go to a quilted paper, packaging thing and cornstarch peanuts, they're going to do it in order to in order to keep your business. This is about money. This is about the economy, and they're going to do it. You have to force them to do it.
Shannon, we talked about this before when we first talked to you about this, and I asked you how you could do this on a when local governments have to take the lowest price bid for whatever it is, and this bid came in a little bit high. Tell us how you did that.
We are not obligated to take the lowest cost bid because we have our sustainable city plan, and because we built in those guiding principles I started in my presentation, we are able to take the best bid. And the best bid for our city sometimes is the lowest cost bid, as long as it also meets established sustainability criteria that we put in all of our procurement documents. So
it's great. I think, and Patty, I think, if every school and every town just made a point about that, we could save a whole lot of stuff going into our solid waste.
Yeah, I'm gonna get 20 schools to do it and then go to Albany to state ed and say, we need a state ed policy in this state to prohibit plastic packing materials in orders that are sent to or shipped to schools.
Yeah.
Once you make it a requirement for them to bid on the project, then by definition you've moved enough upstream that you're not having to deal with the individual, like Jamie said, like sometimes let's just like skip over the things that put the responsibility on the small business or on the resident and move farther up the system so that they're
Absolutely.